I think it was a page before that was talking about uh, how to do the assignment or how to get going. One of the things that's uh, hardest with this assignment, I think, is that with the masking, there's a massive amount of detail that we've been putting into it. Some of the images are becoming quite complex. So how to kind of articulate that or know where you're going can be pretty difficult. So this is me trying to give an example of how I would go about it. So if I so this would be my workbook. So you're probably used to the idea of thumbnails, quick sketches, kind of ideation. With this one here, I would say that one of my photo collages, I've decided, okay, the thing that I suppose is a big deal for me is art and design and that sort of thing. So I've done a sketch here. It's kind of like a rough mock-up of an idea, and so I've got a paint tube, I've got a pen, got here that I've drawn kind of like there's a map of Wellington sticking out of the corner. This would be the landscape like Mount Victoria Hill or something like that. So my environmental part of me, art and Wellington. That's part of the way I define myself. And so I've got here, a whole lot of art stuff, brushes, pens, paint, etc. And then even when I look at this thumbnail, I kind of think, oh, it's a wee bit chaotic. So how can I tell this in a simpler fashion? And so can I simplify it? So I've got a paint can, a brush, a different tube of paint, a little bit of a map, but everything's getting kind of simplified down, and I'm trying to make some sort of composition. At this stage in a workbook, I might do 3 or 4 little sketches. I might have another sketch that has all of these things side by side. So a paintbrush, then a paint can beside it, then a tube of paint beside that, instead of them all kind of one in front of the other. So for me, what's central is going to be art. Now, at this stage, I'd say, okay, so what have I got around the house that I can photograph? And I've got a Sumiant container. I've got Liquitex paint. I've got a few pens. So at this stage, I would start. This is my kind of collection of images, and for you guys, you've probably already collected some. So specific photographs that I've got, and so yeah, photographs taken at this stage. So then for me, I go into, okay, so if this is my factor, if this is going to be my central piece, what can I do with it? And I'll talk about entanglement a lot, and I think I probably already have. The thing that usually happens with Photoshop is that people just put one thing in front of another. If they have a pattern, it's kind of all over. There's this kind of, it looks like layer upon layer upon layer. And for me, all that means is as soon as you look at it, you see Photoshop, or you see the program or the technical aspect before you see it as an illustration. And this for me is what entanglement changes. And I think you can have a look at a multitude of images, and I think on even on Trello, to show you to be honest, but just the way that things work. Some dots come in front. Some look as though they're going behind. The arm comes down, and the body, even though it's blurred, is kind of trying to follow the definition of this hand. So it's in front of the hand, but it's behind the paintbrush strokes. This is probably a little bit more of a simple kind of layering process, but this looks as though it's in front of the green dots. This one, it looks like it's sitting behind. So there's this kind of slipping and sliding with the images, hitting boundaries and changing, being slightly behind but slightly in front of objects. And so everything starts to get entangled or confused. And this is what I'm trying to do here. So I'm saying, okay, well, if I've got these photographs and these objects, what would be my central images? And I pick these, and then it's like, well, how can I kind of play with them or combine them? And the easiest thing to start with is to start blending things, and then to bring the control in. And I'm going to do a quick demo of this one here. So I'll open up an image. Okay, there's my paint tube. Going to very quickly with the object select, and this is the thing, you'll see up the top there's oh, I've lost it behind the menu there. You can drag around, it's going to do object select. Sometimes this one here, select subject, you can hit that and it'll do it straight away for you, depending on how defined your object is. I've got a little wee circle here, so if I hold down the Option key and drag around that, still using the object select tool, it'll knock out that circle. So now I can just hit the mask. Oh, layers. Not sure what the problem is with that. It's not hitting the mask, but that's okay. I can go up to layer mask, reveal selection, and that'll do it. I'm going to go Command T, just spin this around, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to put in an adjustment layer that's just a solid color. So I'm just going to get white, and chuck that behind. Now if I open up the next one, I've got my bottle of ink with a pen on it, and the same thing. Let's try the select subject again and see how well it does. Oh yeah, pretty good. So mask that. Maybe my computer's starting to fill up a bit. So for me, because I'm running low on memory, I'll go edit. I go purge all. Kind of clears the memory, and it's still not going to let me do it. So that's okay. I'll just do it the long way. Layer mask, reveal selection. When I look at this image, it hasn't got a lot of detail under the end of this pen. So if I click on the image, I'm just going to go to filter, and I can still jump back into the camera raw. So I'm going to go here, and it's because I like the tools here where I know I can come in and I can say, okay, I'm going to knock the shadows down, right down, so I can see the definition coming back in this pen, and then the blacks I'm going to bump up. So I'm not even playing with the exposure at this stage. I'm just trying to get a bit more detail. I can jump the highlights up a bit, or just play with the whites. Maybe the shadows I'll bring back up a wee bit. I might have gone a wee bit too far. And I'll go okay. So you can see the change that happens with that. It just cleans it up a wee bit. So I pulled my image over. I'm going to get the arrow key and just drag that across. It's a wee bit big, so I'll just go Command T and downsize it a bit. So at this stage, it's a bit like my drawing. I had something similar with the kind of the pen and the ink bottle going across each other. So for me, I would look at this and think, okay, so what can I do to blend these together that starts to make it look a little bit interesting? And the thing that I look for is, if I look at this, I think, okay, I quite like this hard edge of the top, and I can play around with the edge of this container. So what I'll do is I'm going to say, okay, blending it, I'll only blend part of it. So this idea of, I was talking about before, where things go behind and in front at the same time, that's what I'm going to play with. So with my masks, I can hold down the Command key and click on the mask that's to do with the acrylic paint. Now, all I'm doing there is I'm just choosing the mask I want to use. But then I can click on what I want to affect. And I want to affect the mask on the ink bottle, but using the mask of this container. And so that means now that if I get black, which I know blocks out, and I'm on the ink bottle, it's going to cover that or hide it. At the moment, the opacity is right down low. So I want to get rid of it. So I have it on 100%. And as soon as it hits that selection, my brush, it'll stop. That's what I'm working within, but on this. So I don't have to be careful. It just goes up to that edge and it knocks it out. Now, when I come up here around the brush, I have to be careful, because if I draw over that, I'm going to lose it. So I'll make my brush smaller, and I'm just going to draw around this. If I go over an edge, I just change it to white, and I can cut back in. That means I can get a corner rather than trying to fiddle around and get a tiny little brush to go around that edge. Black again is my foreground color, so I'm just hitting X to swap those around. And masking around that that lid. So I said I like the hard edge of that lid. Now I'm going to run along the edge of this pencil. So if I click here and I click and hold down, and then I hold down the Shift key, and then I let go of the mouse, and I come along here, wherever I click, it's going to do a straight line from point to point. And now I've got a nice straight edge rather than me trying to do a wobbly line with the mouse. And so now I've got this sort of setup. So what I'll do is, the bit that I'll soften is this part here. So and I'm going to leave the top of that lid. So now if I get this brush, make it really soft, I'm going to change the opacity right down so I can do it bit by bit. I use the right square bracket, which is moving the circle up bigger. And I'm just going to eat into this a bit. So I'll keep the curve, I like that. I don't like this little bit down here. So this is the bit that I'm going to work on more. I know that I can come out over the edge. It's going to be stopped by that boundary. And now, if I go Command D, so for me, I'm starting now to get an interplay between the objects that I think looks a lot more engaging, a lot more interesting. For me, the biggest thing I noticed next is the coloration of the tube is a bit much. So I'm going to go to I might go to levels actually, rather than going to hue and saturation. So this is an adjustment layer. So I'm going to affect just that layer there. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to go to blue. I can see a bit of green now coming into those darker areas, but really it's the midtones that I want to try and warm up a bit. Gets a little bit grotesque, like it's getting a bit of green through there. Oops. I'll go to the green. So what we're affecting now is we're just affecting the channels. So I can play around with the color there a wee bit. And this is exactly the same as me coming into the channels. And I'll show you if I go to red and I get let's see if we just get dodge. It's not going to sorry, I'm on the wrong thing. Need to click on the acrylic. And I've lost my channels. There we go. All right, so I'll have the ion beside RGB. I can see I've got just the red channel selected. If I come in here, giving more contrast, it's changing the color. So those adjustment layers are doing the same thing, just we're only seeing it happen from out on the layers. So I can play around with the colors of that. Now, we'll bring in something else. So I've got an image here of Hello Kitty. I suppose I'm not so much of a fan of Hello Kitty now, if I'm honest, but you know. So new layer, paste, Command T. I know I said don't enlarge things up, but in the case of this, it's just a graphic. So I know I can get away with a bit more enlargement of this image. Now this will be a really good example of why the channels is important. If I get the magic wand tool, it's on a tolerance of 32. If I click out here on the white, and I'll just make this mask, layer mask, hide selection this time because I picked the background. This is what you're going to get all the time with this kind of selection process. You end up with this kind of white halo around the edge. If I undo that, you can do things where you say select, modify, expand, and if I do it by 2 pixels, it expands that selection. And now if I go layer mask, hide selection. And this layer masking thing, it's the same as hitting the quick mask down here, just for whatever reason my computer's going slow and isn't quite doing it. Now, you can see I've no longer got that white halo, but if I look at this edge here, because it's eating into the image, sometimes it distorts the edges a bit. With the whiskers, this has been eaten in, so it's kind of a slightly different size to the one in here. It starts to get a bit of an awkward look, and then of course you've got to go through and select other areas and this kind of process. So I'm going to, oops, delete that whole thing. And now I'm going to go to the channels. I'm going to make a new channel. White's my background color, so I'll go Command Delete. So I'm starting with white. Command V. Command T, just to scale it up like I had it before. Hit return to do that. Now, these areas I don't want them to be grey. So if I give a bit more contrast with the levels, just trying to lighten off those greys, but still keep the black there. It's about as far as I can push it. It's got rid of the yellow out of the nose, but not out of here. So I'll just go to the dodge tool and I'll just dodge it out because it's going to affect the grey before it affects the black. And I'll go over the nose just in case there's a little bit there. Command I, because we want to fill the white portions. Hit the select to load it up. Now go to the layers. Make a new layer. Black's my foreground color, so I can just Option Delete to fill it with black. And now we're going to end up with this kind of perfect edge, and it's not going to have the same kind of distortion around the whiskers. I'm just chucking Hello Kitty in there again for a minute, and that's just so that I can make, there's my channel one, I'll make a blank layer and put it underneath. And then what I'm going to do is get my paintbrush tool. I'm just going to bring the colors back into it, so I can use the left square bracket to take that size down. And then if I hit the letter I, get the eyedropper tool, click on the yellow. B will take me back to brush. I've got that yellow now, so on my blank layer here, I can just paint, but with 100%. Behind that black, it's going to give me the yellow, and I'll do the bow as well. So I get the red, B, I'm still underneath that layer, and I'll just color it in. Don't be afraid to ask questions if we're going along, if you want to. And again, because this is being recorded, I'll stick it up on online in Trello. And if I wanted again a new layer underneath the bow and everything, and I could fill in the white on Hello Kitty. Again, remember what you've clicked on and what you're selecting. So if I click, because I don't want to carefully go around all this, if I click on Hello Kitty, it's black and white, so I know if I get the magic wand, I can get the inside of that shape. And I know that if I go select, modify and expand, this time I'll jump it up a bit further, I'll put it on 5. It's behind, it's gone in further, so it will actually be behind that black line. So now on my new blank layer, I can go Command delete, just fill with white, Command D, and it's all there. Now this, yeah, especially with this kind of coloring in sort of stuff, you can end up with way too many layers. So what I'll do is I'll just Shift, select those three, and if I hit the new group folder, it's put them all in there. And once they're in the group, I can click the group and move it all around as one thing. I can get rid of that little image, and you can still mask and play around with a whole lot of it as a group or individually. So in this case, I can say command. I'm going to click on the edge of this paint tube again. I can come up to group, see if it's going to let me do a quick mask this time. No, all right. Layer mask, reveal selection. I kind of want it the other way around. So on that mask, I'll just go Command I. And then it goes behind. Remember that with these forms as well. So let's say with the Hello Kitty writing, the mask is just this big tube. So if I get white as a paintbrush, it's going to let me see what's in that layer. Now I know it's already kind of clear cut, so it's only going to show the lettering. So if I paint in here, it's going to bring that lettering back. If I want part of Hello Kitty's face to fade in, then I'll just go up onto a completely soft brush. I can change the opacity so it's not so hard if I want. And I can bring a bit of that back in. All the other things as well, like if I make a new layer and I just give it a gradient, because what I want to do is I want to color try and color the lettering. So the easiest way is just to drag a gradient across everything, hold down the Option key, and now I'm clipping it to that whole group. But I know, again, with a mask, I can add a mask onto this. So layer, mask, reveal all. So it's got a big blank mask. Black blocks out. So if I don't want to see this color, I paint with black and it takes it back to what it was. But I don't want it to affect the lettering, so I'll put it on a hard brush. So I can just, and again, this is one I always miss, but actually I could leave it like that because I quite like that, but it's still on 40%, the opacity. So if I put it up to 100, but I quite like that effect, a little bit of color coming in, and you can see, so it's the difference between black and this is a bit of a gray. So for a minute, I'm just going to take away Hello Kitty. That was really just to show you the significance of using channels for that sort of work rather than trying to select it in any other way. So this looks like our drawing. This looks like back here. So this stuff is giving you a rough idea of what you're doing, but there will obviously be some things that you can't draw so well. I might do some iterations where it's like, okay, I've got that, and I just write, or I do a scribble and say, I want to add some kind of overlay texture over the top. In this case, I can go to where was it, our stencils. It's on a layer at the moment, so I want to get it into a channel. I'm just going to cut that, don't save it, get rid of it, and then in here I'll come into the channels, another alpha channel, start with white, I'll paste it, and at this stage as well, if I want to see scale wise and everything, I mean, you can do it by going to the layers, but if I switch on the eye beside RGB, I've selected my alpha channel and I can see where it is. So I can actually shuffle it around, even oh no, it's not actually going to let me scale it. I have to do that back in the other way. So I can shuffle it around until it looks good. Command I, so I can select it. I'm switching off the eye. Usually by clicking back on layers, it'll probably do it automatically. So a new layer. Option delete to fill it with red. And then I'm just going to go through these. It's quite nice, the color burn, but I'll just put it, at the moment, I'll just put it on multiply. And so at this stage, I would say, okay, what I like about this image is I like where the color comes out this side. So I'm going to select that tube again, come up here, still no quick mask for me, so layer, layer mask, reveal selection. It's actually the other way around that I want it, so I click on the mask and go Command I. And maybe I'll do the opposite. I'll go Command I again, because I know here with white, I can show the image. Oops, better change it to white then. So I'll paint that in, and there was all this stuff out here. And then I get a wee bit more control, because what I want to do is I want to switch it to black to block it. Take out this stuff and maybe leave that line going up, but just soften things down so I get it a bit like that. Actually, I don't like that so much, so I'm going to come back down to the acrylic, grab it, and I will get rid of that bit there. Now, you know, when you're doing thumbnails, you know, you might not even know that you're going to do this. It's something that's intuitive as you're going along, and even trying to draw it or display it, you have to kind of give an idea of it, and it simply is just, you know, writing something here, that doing a scribble and saying I'm going to bring in a bit of texture as an overlay, and so you start to build up these images. The things that are important is not that you necessarily have to have an image that's busier than this. It can be a simple image, but it's important that it has an element of this this entanglement, because that's essentially fulfilling the learning outcomes and showing that you really understand how to use that stuff and have control over it. So I know that I have a particular style, and I'm not wanting to push you all into replicating exactly the same style that I like. But there's, you know, it's using the channels, and there's lots of ways you can do that and still keep an image that doesn't necessarily have to look like mine. But the idea of entanglement doesn't mean that it has to be a messy image. It just means that you're trying to get the viewer to look at it as an image first, and then perhaps the technique or the program.